Chapter 146. The heavens above. Luonan was quite innocent right now. Not to mention the fact that he wasn't even in a soul attachment state. Ink had successfully merged with the external airflow environment under the blessing of the soul-breathing technique he had comprehended. Its body of crow feathers seemed to melt together with the night sky. When it flapped its wings to fly, it practically had the ability to ride the wind. Its physical strength consumption was minuscule. It was unknown how satisfied it was. Alright, Luonan never expected that the blessing of soul breathing would have such a good effect. It clearly didn't increase Ink's upper limit, but it created an incomparable state for Ink, allowing it to display 150% of its ability. Luonan had secretly learned from Ruiwen. It was no wonder that Ruiwen was able to achieve such godly results with her skinny body. Sometimes, perfect coordination was even more crucial than absolute strength. No matter what Luonan thought, Hiyuan was the supreme commander of this operation. He had to listen to her orders. He could only order Ink to fly to the area designated by Hiyuan. Hiyuan maintained a high standard of work as a secretary. She knew that Luonan probably didn't quite understand what a sniper position was. She even sent over a satellite image of the surrounding area, marking out the locations Luonan needed to be responsible for. She even gave suggestions on the patrol route. Such meticulous work left one speechless. As Ink spread its wings and flew out, it entered the predetermined location. The Society's adjusted operational layout officially entered the implementation stage. At this moment, psychic waves emitted by the xianxia, the main channel of communication, covered an area of several dozen square kilometers. They converged into a densely woven large net outside the range of perception of a normal person, and they began to rapidly converge. Luonan was located in the center of the large net, and he could clearly feel the layers of intersecting psychic waves. The ripples on the surface of the water grew even clearer. Clearly these changes couldn't be hidden from Jack. His mood became even more restless. The crisscrossing psychic waves completely destroyed his search for suspicious signals because there were suspicious signals all around him right now. Jack understood that he was already surrounded. After completing the transformation of his life form, a few negative effects finally arrived. Jack knew that being restless was useless, but he was unable to block off these emotions. The encirclement of the Society's forces was an expected result. Jack didn't need to react so excessively. In the end, it was Luonan's provocation that left him with an extremely bad experience. It was like a scattered weed seed. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The weed seed began to sprout under the watering pressure from all sides. It grew rapidly, devouring the nutrients that originally belonged to his core willpower. The arrogance and conceit from before had long flown off to who knows where. Jack punched the partition of the carriage and began to clean up the equipment that had not been fully installed. His efficiency was much lower than expected. Of course, this debt was also placed on Luonan's head. Although Jack didn't know who was behind that suspicious signal. Jack's reaction was quite interesting, but on Luonan's side, the human-faced arachnid's reaction was in no way inferior. See, the more anxious Jack became, the more restless the human-faced arachnid became. Even though it didn't possess intelligence, its hunger instincts still transmitted a relatively clear message. Translated, it was roughly saying, "Don't tease him like that. The spiritual seed's nutrition has decreased again." It didn't seem like it was going to swallow it directly. Luonan's mind stirred. Under his stimulation, Jack's sensitivity towards the mental plane had increased by an unknown amount. It was to the extent that he was able to sense the encirclement of the Society ahead of time. Even though Luonan believed in Yuan's leadership, Ruiwen was by Jack's side. With Jack's terrible ability to control his emotions, it was better to add another layer of insurance for the sake of safety. Luonan finally loosened the chain, and the human-faced arachnid lost its restraints. It immediately broke out in joy and threw itself straight at Jack. It must be said that Jack's abilities on the mental plane had really made great progress after Luonan's stimulation and tempering. In the past, he didn't have any ability to detect the human-faced arachnid, a darksider life form. But now, a certain intuition made him tense up the moment the human-faced arachnid threw itself at him. It was the probing assemblage that could practically melt the void. Unfortunately, it was still useless. Jack's completely exposed emotional thought process was an irreparable weakness. And the human-faced arachnid's assault method even exceeded Luonan's imagination. The human-faced arachnid really didn't bite down with a ah-woo. Jack was still in the synchronized rhythm of his body and soul, so he still possessed a certain level of defense. This darksider life form possessed a cunning instinct. It avoided a frontal confrontation, and its already weak body instantly transformed into nothingness. Its core essence actually transformed into a minuscule piece of information. This information was captured by Jack's probing apparatus on all sides. And this was it. This chapter has yet to end. Please turn the page. Jack was thrown into a completely defenseless emotional thought process. Luonan watched in stupefaction. The human-faced arachnid transformed into information under the drive of energy. It roamed within the Tower of Babel and collided with other information. A reaction occurred in an instant, flashing with a kind of dark tinge of emotional luster. Luonan immediately deciphered that this was impatience. This bit of impatient emotional element quickly merged into Jack's corresponding emotional torrent. It followed the structure of the Tower of Babel up level by level. Soon, it seeped into a higher level of thought. In this way, the human-faced arachnid was like a kind of virus. It gradually seeped into Jack's soul. This was a fact that Luonan found hard to imagine, but he had witnessed it with his own eyes. The human-faced arachnid began its official work after making contact with Jack's soul. The first thing it did was to weed out. It callously and mercilessly ate all the emotional weeds that helped it enter Jack's higher-level thought process. They were fighting over the nutrients of Jack's core willpower. Then it dove head-first into the depths of Jack's soul. The human-faced arachnid found its final target in the abyss where self-awareness was hard to reach. It seeped with the color of blood and desire, yet it also had layers of faint halos of light. The human-faced arachnid stared greedily at this edible food, but it didn't make any follow-up movements. It just hid nearby, waiting silently. As for Jack, after a series of warning omens that made his heart palpitate, he suddenly discovered that the irritating impatient emotions had suddenly been blown away. This was a change that had no reason at all. But the fatal pressure was the best reason. In any case, his mind had recovered its calmness once more. He was able to face the imminent crisis. His gaze fell upon xuanhuan. He understood that the source of everything was this girl that he had monitored for 3 years. He had tortured her for 3 years. Jack extended his hand. No matter what, he wanted to control xuanhuan in his hands. And at this time, the high-speed moving transport vehicle suddenly swayed sideways. The magnitude of the swing was so great that it simply made people believe that the vehicle had been violently warped. In reality, the vehicle, which was pieced together from solid bulletproof steel plates, had indeed been severely warped. Then it was torn apart. Apologies. Updating the settings has failed. I only discovered it now. There's still a chapter ahead. Everyone, don't forget to subscribe. Also, what the hell is with the initial order being lower than the later chapters? Chapter 147. Jack's fingers, which were about to touch xuanhuan's body, suddenly pulled away at least 2 meters from his target. The darkness of the night outside the car was like a muddy river, suddenly lying horizontally between him and xuanhuan. See, impossible. Jack's mind instantly calculated the terrifying and absurd amount of energy needed to forcibly tear apart a bulletproof steel plate. Using the simplest logical deduction, this energy could be blasted in the most efficient way possible. It could completely penetrate him in one hit. Jack's self-awareness glowed with brilliance in a single thought, dispersing the strange power acting on his mental plane. In an instant, the warped and cracked car and the darkness of the night between him and xuanhuan all transformed into fluctuating mottled colors. With a slight spin, they dissipated without a trace. The car had indeed swayed sideways and crashed into the abandoned ground floor of a building, but it wasn't as serious as he'd felt before. At this time, all levels of detection equipment had long since transmitted the information of the EMP electromagnetic attack, but he was completely unaware. Mental illusion? I can also be affected by illusion? An indescribably complex mood churned, then instantly chilled. Because Jack had just been affected by the illusion and electromagnetic attack, his body's reaction was erroneous. In the severe swaying of the car, he had already thrown off the distance between him and xuanhuan. His back pressed against the wall of the car, wanting to borrow the force to spring up and grab xuanhuan's protective artifact. At this time the car behind him made a ping sound. See, the sound was oppressive and heavy. The peerlessly strange power transmitted from the outside of the car, almost without any damage, directly into the exoskeleton armor, into the half-decayed body. The vibrating power seemed to radiate outward from the chest of the body. The tightly arranged configuration of the dynamo core trembled slightly. This time, his body was actually shaken to the point of freezing on the spot. The second ping sound came, the front force and the back force overlapping. The two different vibrations intersected and stimulated each other. The structure of the half of the body that had already decayed due to Ruewen's deathly stillness ability completely collapsed, turning into a meaningless dead bag of skin. It even affected the other half of the body, causing the fine threads of the dynamo core to have to be rearranged. Therefore Jack still couldn't move. Then came the third ping sound. Jack's ice-cold mask. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Then the demon eye suddenly flashed. The omnidirectional detection instrument had already formed an image of the carriage and projected it back. Outside was a short and stocky middle-aged man wearing a casual short-sleeved shirt. However, his arms were so swollen that even the cuffs on his upper arms were torn. At this moment he was punching the outer wall of the carriage. What was strange was that the power of his fist caused Jack, who was in the carriage, to be battered and exhausted, but the place where his fist landed was as flat as before. At least a B-class martial artist. When this judgment was formed, dark red flames burned from Jack's decaying body inside the exoskeleton armor. From the inside to the outside, it lit up the surroundings with a loud bang. In an instant, the body inside the exoskeleton armor turned to ash, but the format of fire wasn't affected in the slightest. Through the amplification of the armor, it gushed out from his back. The bulletproof iron plate on the back of the carriage had a radius of about 1 meter, and it was instantly covered in high temperature. Under the convergence of the archetype format, the astonishing heat did not spread at all and was transmitted to the outer layer of the carriage. A muffled groan came from outside the carriage. The large-armed martial artist's fist was scorched black by the high temperature, especially by the power of the format of fire. His third strike was forcibly interrupted, and his figure flashed backwards. Jack finally regained his freedom. He didn't care about the exhaustion caused by the instantaneous eruption. He turned around to grab Ruewen, but at this moment he saw the rear of the carriage explode open. The big fellow, Cragburst, who he had exchanged blows with before, charged in while laughing loudly. He disregarded everything and engaged in close combat. I'm done for. Jack knew that he no longer had the strength to snatch Ruewen into his hands. His demon eye instantly dimmed, but it immediately brightened once more. Even if I don't have Ruewen, I still have the dynamo core. I still have energy. I haven't failed. Within the open carriage, the two beast-like experts instantly engaged in close combat. The bursting power made it seem as if this 5-ton transport vehicle could topple over at any moment. The rescue operation was already over at this moment. It was surprisingly straightforward and efficient. The personnel deployed in the surroundings appeared one after another, surrounding the transport vehicle. It was like catching a turtle in a jar. Xianxia stood beneath a concrete pillar in the abandoned area. She calmly observed the current situation. A small old man stood loosely by her side. He yawned incessantly. It was the large-armed martial artist who had just played a crucial role. Please turn the page if this chapter isn't finished. He walked back. His arm had already returned to its normal limits. It was only a bit thicker than an ordinary person's. He swung his injured arm and sighed with emotion. Secretary, you really are daring. You used an illusion technique on an altered human that was neither human nor ghost, and you succeeded. Daydream. Not bad. Daydream was the veteran psychic of the Xia City branch, Mr. White. He yawned again when he heard what was said. He shook his head and said, this person's mood fluctuates greatly. His defense is surprisingly sloppy. He's inferior to an ordinary person to a certain degree. Of course, his logical abilities are extremely strong and he recovers quickly. But as long as the first step is hit, the subsequent steps won't be a problem. Xianxia slightly bowed towards the large-armed martial artist. I just exchanged a bit of information with Quantum Corporation. You've worked hard, Mr. Giant Arm. If it weren't for your 2 successful strikes, things wouldn't have gone so smoothly. I'm ashamed. Originally, I was going to hit with 3 strikes. I didn't think that this altered human's format of fire could be controlled to this degree. Cragburst was blasted out amidst the explosion of flames as he spoke. No matter how valiant Cragburst was, he was still made of flesh and blood. Compared to Jack, who was a complete metal construct, Cragburst suffered quite a bit. Jack blasted Cragburst back with a single strike and walked out with large strides. He landed in the center of the empty space and faced the dozen or so veteran awakened of the Ability User Society. There was a great disparity between the strong and the weak, but he was fearless. This boldness made people have a whole new level of respect for him. However, Luonan, who was observing from the sky, was a bit embarrassed. This? What the hell is the human-faced arachnid doing? From Luonan's perspective, at least half of the credit for Jack's current performance could be attributed to the human-faced arachnid. It was precisely this fellow that lay in wait in the depths of Jack's soul. It endlessly guided the direction of Jack's emotions and eliminated nearly all of the negative elements. This allowed Jack to fight more and more bravely, bursting forth with the fierceness from the depths of his heart. Because of the burden of the human-faced arachnid, Luonan seemed to be on the same side as Jack. Right now, the human-faced arachnid was extremely excited. Its bizarre and unfathomable instincts were currently urging it to bring out the most valuable portion of Jack's soul strength and pour it into the spiritual seed before its eyes. Right now, it wasn't like a savage darksider species. Instead, it was like a diligent gardener. The spiritual seed before its eyes was gradually washed of its lustful bloodlust and blossomed with a radiance that grew brighter and brighter. Chapter 148. Jack had never felt so good before. Even though he was besieged, even though Ruewen had been snatched away, the pressure had stimulated all of his potential. The configuration of the dynamo core even more so allowed him to see how energy and information could truly operate with high efficiency. The same information was converged and analyzed, but he was able to see the unprecedented angle and content. Even when he was in the most passive position, he could grasp the most detailed changes in the situation without any hesitation or confusion. Because of this, he had nothing to fear. Apart from the external, there was also the internal. Jack could sense that the strength of the dynamo core was being held back by his crude steel body design. It was only able to bring out a very small portion of its power. But this didn't make him depressed. On the contrary, it encouraged and motivated him. As long as he could charge out, his future would be limitless. The glorious prospect had ignited the true flames in his heart. The internal energy of the format coiled and coiled, making contact with the flames and igniting anew. The color of the format of fire was even brighter and carried a faint golden edge. The twisted patterns in the air and the flames formed a marvelous archetype format. It displayed a mysterious and profound pattern, but it gradually disappeared as it accumulated even more power. Jack unsheathed his close combat sword. The format of fire spread to the blade, rippling with a layer of distorted rainbow light. Wherever the blade pointed, even the society's aptitude users who had the absolute upper hand had to squint their eyes. Papa Giant Arm clapped his hands against Jack, whose aura was rising. I thought you were just a peddler who harmed children, but now it seems that you're a very ruthless human trafficker. The piles of bones under the Dashang building were all used by a lunatic like you to train your courage, right? The demonic eyes behind Jack's multi-edged helmet shot out a cold glare. Every dead person has a specific recovery procedure. Bones and such have never been left. Jack laughed out loud when the giant arm paused. At first, it was just the sound of the signal being transferred to the loudspeaker. Later, it was the sound of pure flames surging and exploding, shaking the entire abandoned floor. Luonan retreated a bit deeper into the mental plane as Jack laughed loudly. It wasn't because of Jack, but because of Mr. Daydream Bai, who stood by He Yuan's side. This wasn't the first time Luonan had heard of Mr. Bai the psychic. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. It was a well-deserved reputation. Unbeknownst to him, there was already a thin layer of mist flowing on the spiritual plane. It gradually thickened and silently opened up a domain that belonged to him on the spiritual plane, and it permeated towards Jack's direction. While Jack was talking nonsense, Mr. White had already launched an attack on him. Luonan had seen it before. It was when Jack was attacked by the illusion technique. The smoke itself was a lot of fine and fuzzy inductive information. It cut into the material plane from the mental plane. Jack was defenseless and exceptionally sharp in the Tower of Babel. The smoke wantonly created illusions. The effects were extremely miraculous. But now the situation seemed to have changed. Jack's Babel was still defenseless, but the rhythm of the flow of energy and information had been completely elevated to another level. Before it was a surging tide. Now it was a crazily leaping flame. His speed, efficiency, and strength had all been raised to an astonishing level. If they wanted to deceive him with false information they could, but they had to be as crazy as he was. This was not Mr. White's forte. So the flame broke through the encirclement of the mist in a mere breath of time. It even seized the opportunity to charge upwards. It wantonly flourished on the mental plane, and the light of the flame soared. Mr. White grunted and the smoke slowly dispersed. Luonan unconsciously narrowed his eyes. This was a purely subconscious action, but he could see just how dazzling Jack's soul aura was right now. This sort of unreserved, unconcealed, and wantonly eruption of light could only appear in a special situation like Jack's. Luonan didn't know why, but a very inappropriate feeling grew in his heart. He saw Mr. White at this time, and his brows furrowed for a moment. His body subconsciously took half a step back. Actually, Luonan also took a step back. He tried to hide a bit deeper on the mental plane. This time it was all because of Jack. Presumably, Mr. White's feelings were similar to Luonan's. Jack's light was too dazzling. People who were used to appearing and disappearing on the mental plane certainly liked the sort of private feeling of knowing others not knowing. But Jack was doing the complete opposite. It was just like, oh? A sudden chill suddenly descended, and the inappropriate feeling in Luonan's heart suddenly became even more substantial. It was also here. Please continue to the next page if this chapter doesn't end. In this moment, a buzzing sound penetrated through. The heavily chained crow suddenly collapsed, emitting an extremely subtle trembling sound to warn him. The human-faced arachnid, which had been plowing and waiting in the abyss of Jack's soul all this time, also changed its state. It circled around the spiritual seed, carrying restlessness amidst its fierceness. Luonan's thoughts rose under the stimulation of all sorts of ominous omens. His field of view was no longer limited to a corner. Instead, it expanded with all its might until it reached its limit. There were no abnormalities within a radius of 1 kilometer. But a bit further away, ink was flying idly in the vicinity of the so-called sniper position. Its feathers suddenly exploded. It let out a coarse squawk and dove down, fleeing in a panic. It was a hair too late. A certain fleeting shadow cut in and out of the tiny range of Luonan's senses, disappearing into the chaotic and fuzzy darkness. Ink? Luonan didn't have enough time to rush over. He could only rely on his only employee. Ink displayed superb flying skills under his command. It continuously changed its route, flying a circle around the complex region near the sniper position. A short 3 seconds later, the fleeting shadow re-entered the range of Ink's senses. It floated in the void right now, not paying any attention to the crows fluttering nearby. It just lined up its 2 eyes side by side, and its strange gaze of 6 heterochromatic pupils pointed at the location of Luonan and the others. Its gaze was filled with greed and hunger. Luonan instantly understood where that inappropriate feeling came from. That's right. Jack's completely defenseless mode of energy and information. Jack's emotions and thought processes were completely exposed. There was also the ceaseless sharpening and the rapid increase in his soul strength. Although this fellow didn't have any accomplishments on the mental plane, the willful eruption of soul radiance was just as Luonan had described. It was like a bonfire in the night. Only the heavens knew what sort of danger it would attract. Now the answer had appeared. Human-faced arachnid. Another human-faced arachnid. This was absolutely an enormous variable. Luonan was just about to report this to Hiyuan when Ink's range of senses suddenly darkened. A powerful pulse swept past. The energy, information, and corresponding tempo contained within it instantly exceeded the limits of what Luonan's senses could bear. The mental plane suddenly shook violently in the next moment. A whistling and surging hurricane came from nowhere, sweeping everything that Luonan could sense. Chapter 149. Tonight, Luonan had witnessed 2 EMP electromagnetic bombs explode. No matter what the effects were, he could see that people always hoped to destroy the enemy's eyes, ears, and mobility before engaging in combat. Then they could reap the harvest calmly. However, Luonan never imagined that he would actually encounter a method similar to an electromagnetic attack on the mental plane. The hurricane that came out of nowhere was stirring up trouble on the boundary between the mental plane and the material plane. The first to be destroyed was the psychic wave network built between the members of the association. Luonan's message to Hiyuan flew to who knows where halfway. Then Luonan's mental senses received an attack. Whether it was range or precision, everything was suppressed again and again. Luonan discovered that he could only sense an area of 30 meters around him in a daze. The range had shrunk by over 10 times, and the precision was too horrible to look at. Luonan discovered that he was still fine. Mr. Bai's situation was even worse than his. This little old man's appearance was more like he had been targeted. Traces of blood flowed out from the corners of his eyes and nostrils. He was even a bit unsteady on his feet. He leaned back against a pillar to prevent himself from falling down in a sorry state. This should be a spiritual storm in the truest sense of the word. It almost destroyed and overturned all existences on the spiritual plane, instantly clearing the area. Luonan couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Just what stage had the human-faced arachnid grown to? The only thing worth rejoicing about was that Luonan's connection with Ink, the human-faced arachnid, and Ruewen had not been severed through the format pyramid. Luonan was even able to send a bit of support to Ink through the air. The light waves of the format pyramid hidden behind the black feather comforted the frightened little fellow. Correspondingly, the human-faced arachnid, which was even sharper than him, transmitted a warning message to a certain degree. In this way, Luonan knew that the human-faced arachnid, which had stopped in the air above the sniping position, had already swept over in this chaotic situation. Okay, this was a bit confusing. Luonan gave his human-faced arachnid a nickname, Wraith Sign. Even if it had a nickname, the Wraith Sign, which lacked spiritual intelligence, couldn't provide any more information. It didn't know anything about the route or the speed. But Luonan knew that the enemy's most likely target was still Jack. Jack was the only person who didn't suffer from the mental storm just now. Such preferential treatment was not given to Jack, but to the constantly growing spiritual seed. Jack still did not know what was going on. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. His unbridled soul radiance had attracted this storm. He didn't even know that he had struck the jackpot and was being targeted by two human-faced arachnids at the same time. Even though he didn't receive the attack, he could still sense it the moment the storm started. He immediately made a decision. Laughter and the rumbling of flames didn't stop. He raised the alloy combat blade horizontally and brazenly charged. He thought his chance had come. This was indeed his chance. Because of the mental storm, the psychic wave network had been severed. All the ability users were stunned, and their reactions were slower by more than a beat. However, as the commander of this operation, Xuanhuan still maintained a high speed of thought. Giant Arm. Only calling him by his code name without any honorifics meant that the situation was urgent. As the strongest person on the scene, Giant Arms knew that the current situation was strange, but he also knew that he had to take responsibility. Almost as soon as Xuanhuan gave the order, he exerted his strength to fly, only a bit slower than Jack. Giant Arm's line and angle were absolutely perfect. He flew from the side, found a short path, and stabbed straight at Jack's flank. His two arms suddenly swelled, causing the cuffs of his short sleeves to completely collapse. His arms were bare, and a heavy fist was imprinted in front of him. Jack didn't even turn his head. The exoskeleton armor swung its tail, facing Giant Arm from the side. It became the back of his head. Most importantly, the nozzle on his back suddenly opened. Disregarding the damage to his body, he forcefully pushed it to the highest gear and spat out a deep blue flame. The terrifyingly high temperature made Giant Arm let out a muffled groan. He forcefully withdrew his strength and dodged, but Jack raised his speed to the highest. The alloy combat blade didn't have any fancy tricks. It was a simple stab forward, and there wasn't a body of flesh and blood that could block the flames of the format of fire. Where the edge of the blade pointed, the waves split. It was originally a thin layer of encirclement, but without the unified command of the psychic wave network, it was like a plate of loose sand. It was pierced through in an instant. Right now, the deep blue walker exoskeleton armor's feet didn't touch the ground. With the assistance of the auxiliary thrusters, it shot toward the window of the abandoned floor that led to the outside world. Giant Arm, Crag Burst, and the others strove to catch up, but it was an impossible task to compete with the exoskeleton armor with its thrusters fully activated. The window continued to enlarge in front of Jack. It swallowed him and released him, allowing him to be cast into the night of Xia City's recycling stratum. There was an explosive rumble. The wall at the edge of the window was bombarded by Giant Arm's fist, which was a step too late. The wall instantly collapsed. The flying rubble collapsed outwards, but it was swept to dust in front of the format of fire. It was a success. From now on, the sky was high and the sea was wide. Birds flew and fish leaped. Please turn the page if this chapter isn't finished. Jack raised his head to look at the night sky of Xia City. Under the blurry colors of light, his longing and dreams vaguely transformed into a stairway to heaven. It dropped down from high in the sky all the way to his feet. Right now, the flames in his heart were burning at their most intense. Ripples formed in the void. With Jack's current level, his interference with the mental and material planes had already reached a very high precision. Naturally, this kind of change couldn't be hidden from him. However, the human-faced arachnid stepped out of nothingness. It didn't give Jack any time to react. The malevolent and terrifying specter was practically sticking face to face. It silently penetrated Jack's exoskeleton armor. Jack's consciousness of fear hadn't even risen yet. Right now he was still displaying ecstasy and pride on the outside. His emotions were like exploding flames. However, the human-faced arachnid burned with the same bewitching demonic fire. It instantly covered Jack's entire body. At this moment, under the illumination of the format of fire, the specter of the human-faced arachnid clearly and completely overlapped with Jack's. The dense shadow seeped into the soaring soul fire. The fierce and ugly mouth opened wide, accurately capturing the spiritual seed that seemed to be on the verge of igniting in the depths of Jack's soul. The arachnid bit down and swallowed it. Jack's charging figure suddenly froze and the glow of his demonic eye dimmed. In the eyes of the pursuing ability users, the exoskeleton armor, which had already flown into the air, lost control. It fell headfirst to the ground. While giant arms and crag-burst were stunned, the sound of wind suddenly rose behind them. Another person leaped out of the window. A slender figure streaked across the sky, brushing past the rapidly falling exoskeleton armor. Man and blade became one. The light of the format of fire flickered intensely as it pointed straight at the seemingly empty curtain of night. After the curtain of night, the human-faced arachnid had just eaten a delicious meal. It was smacking its mouth to savor it when the blade light arrived. Yuan. Her target wasn't Jack but the human-faced arachnid. At this moment, Mr. Bai, who had been standing next to her just now, temporarily took over Yuan's command. He endured the pain of his wounded soul and loudly reported the situation. Human-faced arachnid has been discovered. Third contingency plan. Luonan was shaken on the mental plane when his voice rang out. This was because he saw another hurricane that spanned the material plane and the mental plane at this very moment. It whistled over. Right now the human-faced arachnid was dodging Yuan's blade light with all its strength. It absolutely didn't have any spare energy to launch an attack. Luonan suddenly understood something. The mental storm isn't the work of the human-faced arachnid. There's still a powerful person behind. Chapter 150. The mental storm descended again. Unlike the previous EMP-type interference, the mental storm this time obviously increased the suppression of the key targets. Mr. White, Giant Arm and Cragburst were the most outstanding and experienced ability users. They became the main targets of the attacks. Mr. White was the most pathetic of them all. Giant Arms and Cragburst primarily used the power of the material plane. Their coordination of body and soul might not be as perfect as Rui Wen's, but it wasn't difficult for them to reach an outstanding level. They also possessed a certain amount of defensive power with the addition of the chemical carrier. Most of Mr. White's abilities were on the spiritual level. As the saying went, the bird that poked its head out would be shot. Naturally, he was the one who received the most damage, not to mention that he was the temporary commander. Mr. White was already sitting on the ground. His hands were forming a strange seal. He was trying to keep his mind focused. He had lost the ability to speak and give orders. Seeing this, the remaining 7 or 8 ability users could only act according to the plan. They surrounded Mr. Bai in a circle, placing the unconscious Rui Wen in the circle. They held their breaths and focused their minds, putting all their effort into defending. Cragburst and Giant Arms saw the situation over there from the window. They cried out in their hearts. It was clear that they couldn't count on Mr. White for the time being. Under the impact of the mental storm, even though the two of them possessed astonishing courage and strength, they still needed some time to adapt to the distortion of their 5 senses and 6 senses and the increasing pressure. As a result, whether it was returning to Mr. Bai's aid or Yuan's aid, they were both slower by more than a beat. They could only look on helplessly as Yuan leaped out of the window and slashed down towards the night sky. Luonan's soul body floated in the night sky, once again witnessing Yuan's stunning and peerless blade technique. Yuan was a burner, but from what Luonan could see with his clairvoyance, she was the only burner he had seen who could completely control and even subdue the format of fire. She used the power of the format of fire, but also abandoned the outer shell of the format of fire to the greatest extent. She added pure power to the blade, completely under the control of her will. She used the power of the material plane to forcibly annihilate targets on the spiritual plane. To her, the format of fire was just a source of power. She had an even stricter set of self-logic to control this power. Perhaps this was the secret behind the astonishing power of her saber technique. Where the blade pointed, the human-faced arachnid. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. He didn't dare to take it head-on and dodged with all his might. However, Yuan had perfectly utilized the man-faced arachnid's method of hunting down Jack to perfection. Seizing the opportunity, seizing the rhythm. Right when the human-faced arachnid was in the midst of digesting the spiritual seed, a blade came falling down. Half of the arachnid's 4 limbs were chopped off, transforming into smoke. The human-faced arachnid let out a howl of pain. Its body turned incorporeal and it fled into the sky. Yuan tried to adjust her attack, But at this moment, giant arm and crag burst suffered from the mental attack. Their follow-up support was a beat too slow, and the front and back were separated. Her figure was high in the air, and there was practically no room for change. An omen of alarm suddenly rose in Luonan's mind. He sent out his telepathic thoughts, "Be careful." Now it could already be seen that the second wave of the spiritual storm was deliberately let go of Hiyuan, so that the forward commander was not on the same rhythm as everyone else. Then the third wave, which was specifically targeted at Hiyuan, descended. The attack was no longer a mental storm, but a blinding lightning strike from the mental plane. Luonan's warning was extremely timely. Though Hiyuan's body was falling rapidly through the air, she placed the blade horizontally in front of her chest. Her body and soul instantly entered a solid and stable rhythm. Clang. The alloy knife in Hiyuan's hand actually let out the sound of metal clashing. The edge of the knife trembled involuntarily, just like Hiyuan's current state of mind. But in the end she managed to defend herself. But whether it was Luonan or Hiyuan herself, neither of them had any intentions of relaxing. The air fluctuated once more. The malevolent human-faced arachnid displayed its characteristic of appearing and disappearing like a ghost. It seized the opportunity and suddenly attacked. It seized the instant when Hiyuan's rhythm of body and soul became chaotic. It coordinated seamlessly with the mysterious expert in the distance. Siege Hammer. The human-faced arachnid's specialization in mental attacks and the Siege Hammer's special methods revealed their might at this moment. The alloy knife rang out again and the vibrations intensified. Hiyuan's body and soul rhythm, which wasn't too serious at first, were clearly cracked by this Siege Hammer attack. If she wanted to adjust back, she would need at least 1 to 2 seconds. But the human-faced arachnid wouldn't give her this opportunity. It screeched on the mental plane and its 6 heterochromatic eyes flashed in unison. It wanted to seize this opening and seize the greatest victory. Have you had enough? Luonan couldn't bear to watch any longer. He sent out telepathic thoughts, which was a signal. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The demonic body of the arrogant human-faced arachnid suddenly went rigid. Its 6 heterochromatic eyes, which had been glowing with an extraordinary splendor, each color was thrown into chaos. It was at a loss at first, but then it sensed something. It saw the heavily chained crow suddenly appear on the mental plane. It was taut and perfectly straight. One end had sunk deep into the depths of the void, but the other end had connected to its abdomen at an unknown time. It even pierced through. The human-faced arachnid had no way of understanding its current situation, but its instincts were telling it that this situation was extremely, extremely bad. It screeched and its demonic body leaped into the air, wanting to break free from this chain that seemed both real and illusory. However, this only caused the chain to rattle and tremble. The corresponding information passed through the chain and was transmitted back endlessly. This allowed Luonan, who was on the other end, to truly feel what the interior of the human-faced arachnid's demonic body was like. It was a deep and turbid furnace of hell. Flames sprayed and the sea of fire churned. The most intuitive feeling one could feel here was the high temperature. Of course, this was just a type of comprehension through the senses. It was hard to imagine that a darksider life form like the human-faced arachnid would contain a furnace of several tens of thousands of degrees within its body. This should be a terrifying power structure that swallowed consciousness and melted the soul. It just appeared in its current form. The chaotic fragments of information and emotions were like overgrown weeds. They scattered along with the gushing flames, occasionally colliding with each other to form a tiny bit of consciousness for a brief moment. Then they screamed miserably within the sea of fire furnace of hell as they melted. The cycle repeated itself. Luonan locked onto the spiritual seed that he had just plucked from the depths of Jack's soul in the center of this terrifying furnace of hell. The outer layer of the seed had already melted in this furnace of hell, but that was all. When this outer layer disintegrated and digested, a bit of demonic mottled radiance jumped out from within. It resonated closely with Luonan's chain, resisting the fatal flow of fire that existed everywhere. It lit up the strict and standardized format pyramid structure. The tetrahedron, the inscribed sphere, and the circumscribed sphere appeared clearly. It suppressed a small area with its unique structure, giving the bit of mottled radiance time to grow. In the blink of an eye, the demonic mottled radiance rapidly magnified. Its 8 legs spread out and its 6 pupils changed color. Its half-arachnid, half-human body stood stooped out of habit, yet it possessed the cruel tension of pouncing on its prey at any moment. In this way, the human-faced arachnid was the manifestation of the wraith sign. It manifested within the stomach of another human-faced arachnid. Chapter 151. The Furnace's Inferno was extremely repulsive towards the Wraith sign, an outsider. Huge bubbles appeared in the sea of fire, revealing a deep magma-like structure. The flames above the sea of fire were like dancing pythons, roaring as they tried to devour the devil's sign. At this time, the furnace of hell didn't seem to be in the stomach of a darksider life form. Instead, it seemed to exist in the center of an enormous world. There was a fantastical feeling of a Mount Sumeru in a mustard seed. Faced with such an environment, the Wraith sign was not in a hurry to resist or destroy. What he did was to howl at the sky. His body burned with a blood-colored flame that seemed to be solid, merging with the format pyramid on the outer layer. The unique structure of the format pyramid expanded outwards layer by layer. At the center of the furnace of Inferno, lines of different densities shuttled and intersected in the ocean of fire, building one basic structure after another before they were connected into a complicated whole. This scene was so familiar, just like the magical altar in the Dashang building's fighting arena. That was right. The Wraith sign had built a new altar. Previously, it was built on the turbid emotions of hundreds of spectators. Now it was built on the lava. Luonan's eyes were still groping in the dark when the last altar was constructed. He was a standard example of knowing the how, but not knowing the why. But as he came into contact with the Tower of Babel built by the Dynamo Core, and through Jack's selfless demonstration, he understood the structural rules of operating energy and information. In addition, after grasping the soul-breathing technique, he gradually realized the mysteries of the interconnection between the spiritual and the material planes. Now it seemed that he was a little enlightened. Luonan noticed that the structures of the two altars were very similar. They didn't seem to possess essential differences, especially the operating principles of the two altars. In other words, the method of handling energy and information was exactly the same. From a simple logical deduction, it could be seen that the same form was often rooted in the same content. Since the structure was like that, the basis of its existence should not change too much. Oh, in other words, the foundation behind this furnace of hell is actually similar in nature to the spectators in the arena. It's just that one manifests as a turbid flow of emotions, while the other manifests as a furnace of flames. Luonan watched with great interest. The turbid flow that is rooted in the emotions and desires of the human heart can actually develop into different forms and possess different functions. This transformation was caused by the human-faced arachnid. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Is that it, or are there other factors? Luonan observed the furnace of hell once more with questions and gains in mind. He felt it to be even more penetrating, and his understanding became even clearer. As the Wraith sign continued to build the altar, the giant flame pythons that had been attacking it from the outside gradually stopped attacking it. On the other hand, in the lava below the sea of fire, the bubbles popped one after another. They were clearly distorted human faces, staring at the Wraith sign with hatred, fear, and fanaticism. But no matter what, they could not stop the continuous expansion and perfection of the altar's structure. Moreover, with the arrangement of the various functional structures, the deterrence of the altar became weaker and weaker. Things were just that interesting. No matter how horrifying and tragic the scene was, when the altar was built, who was the priest, who was the sacrifice, who had the power of a ruler, and who was just a stupid pig or sheep, it would all be clearly distinguished in such a cold and cruel way. The terrifying scene of the furnace of hell continued. Perhaps it did have the powerful ability to swallow consciousness and melt souls, but just based on the level of the altar, it could not pose any threat to the Wraith sign on the altar. In other words, the Wraith sign had used an altar to suppress the furnace. At the same time, it was stripping away the more essential things of the Inferno prison. As the altar was built, the furnace of hell was suppressed. The human-faced arachnid, pierced by the heavily chained crow, grew more and more restless. It even revealed a reaction of fear. It suddenly shrieked, broke through the air, and left in spite of everything. This kind of situation was quite similar to the day when Luonan was dragged away by the burning wraith on the warship. The problem was that although only a few days had passed, Luonan was no longer an ignorant person. Through the Wraith sign, he had a deep understanding of the human-faced arachnid. He did not need to be afraid to face it head-on, let alone now that he had placed Monkey Sun in its stomach. Freeze. The heavily chained crow trembled, and the power of the format of "My Heart's a Prison" poured in. The human-faced arachnid had the altar wreaking havoc inside, and the chains were capturing it outside. In addition, it had suffered a blow from Yuan, injuring its vitality. Its power of resistance decreased again and again. It had clearly straddled through the air, but it was actually forcefully dragged back by Luonan. This wave of noise was far too large. Not only did Yuan, who was nearby, feel the abnormality, but the mysterious power in the distance was also terrified and shocked. His mind was scattered quite a bit. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The most direct effect was that his follow-up killing move aimed at Yuan was cut off. She landed safely on the ground and retreated backwards. Giant arm and crag burst broke through the mental suppression one after the other on the abandoned floor. The three joined together in the blink of an eye, and they retreated to where Mr. Bai was. Right now, the members of the society's defensive circle were in a state of confusion. When the three returned, they scattered and stood apart. They formed a triangular structure around the ring-shaped defensive circle. Yuan gave a command in a deep voice. She gave everyone a clear command: reboot the xianxia. Select the local network structure. In the blink of an eye, all the members of the society completed this step. A psychic wave local network was established. Energy and information were interconnected between the members of the various societies, forming a joint force against the outside world. According to Yuan's distribution of authority, Shi, Giant Arm, and Crag Burst formed the three stable fulcrums of the local network. All energy and information had to pass through these three fulcrums to complete their work. This completely shifted the pressure of the mental storm's attack onto their bodies. Mr. Bai finally obtained a chance to breathe within the local network. He slowly recovered and relied on the deep application of the xianxia to sort out everyone's joint force. He formed a sizable flood of energy and information. It passed Yuan and the other two and buzzed through the suppression of the mental storm. It entered the depths of the boundless night sky and connected with the true psychic wave network in the blink of an eye. The special form of energy and information opened up the society's special authority on the psychic wave. The warning and distress signals were sent out in the first instance and were received by the society's managers. The Xia City Ability User Society was completely activated in a short few seconds. What happened? After Luonan grabbed the human-faced arachnid, he hid himself even deeper into the mental plane to avoid the possible retaliation attack of the mysterious power. But the anticipated attack didn't come. Instead, the xianxia, which had been shielded by the mental storm, transmitted a broken message after a series of crackling noises. Members? Confirmed. Interference source. Attack authorization unlocked. All members prepare to attack. In the next moment, the sky of Xia City seemed to light up. The Mid-Autumn Festival is approaching. There are many things to worry about. Please allow me to be lazy. There will be more at around 12 o'clock. Chapter 152. Approximately 1,500 meters away from the abandoned floor where Yuan and the others had besieged Jack, there was a group of high-rise buildings. Looking down from here, one could see the abandoned floor and the surrounding area. This was the sniper position that Yuan had pointed out. It was also the area where Ink was active. At the beginning of the mental storm, this rather intelligent crow hid obediently under a clock tower of a high-rise building. It arched its wings, buried its head, and remained motionless. That's right, the area of attack of the mental storm was 1,500 meters away. It had nothing to do with Ink. But the problem was that the distance between the person who unleashed the mental storm and Ink was far too close. They were separated by a large clock, nothing more. Above the cowering crow, at the top of the clock tower, the turbid black smoke converged into a faintly discernible shadow. It blended perfectly into the darkness of the night. Only the shape of its eyes, which were like weak sparks, carried a hint of a person within this mass of black smoke. Such an image was like a ghost, like a demon. It was terrifying to the soul. It was just that compared to the awe-inspiring might of the three consecutive waves of powerful mental attacks, the smoke man right now had a vexed and depressed mood. The human-faced arachnid should have left after eating, but it only made 2 more moves. This is 2F** king against the rules. The smoke man could feel that the psychic wave network that covered this area was in the process of being activated. It allowed the power of the controller of the psychic wave network to be fully transmitted over. Through the guidance of the ability users on the abandoned floor, a tyrannical attack spanning several hundred kilometers could be realized. If he had the chance, he would be very happy to go to the entrance of the Wilderness Explorers Society of Xia City and curse at Ouyang Chen's shameless behavior. But it was too late to say anything at this time. Actually, if he had disregarded everything and fled with all his might at the first moment he sensed the human-faced arachnid, there was still a chance. But the troublesome human-faced arachnid that had hunted for food was the greatest hope for the Order to nurture a sacrificial vessel. He could not abandon it no matter what. That damn chain. Break for me. The smoke man had truly thrown caution to the wind. He withstood the increasingly terrifying spiritual pressure of this area. He forcefully separated a portion of the turbid smoke from his black smoke soul body and tossed it into the air. The smoke conducted a transformation on the mental plane and the material plane. It quickly tempered into a sharp edge. By the time the human-faced arachnid was locked in place by the chains, the smoke had already transformed into a swift and fierce ray of light. It chopped downwards. This turbid fire saber not only had to cut through the chains, but it also had to cut through the chains. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Only those shameless people hiding in the depths of the mental plane could vent the anger in his heart. Who would have thought that this saber strike, which was filled with his anger and hatred, would slash empty air? The heavily chained crow disappeared into thin air, its whereabouts unknown. On the other hand, the human-faced arachnid had inexplicably recovered its freedom. It was still frozen in place and its malevolent face looked incredibly stupid. This blood flame blessing. When his life was at stake, how could this smoke man have time to think? At this time, the abandoned floor was lit up on its own. The activated psychic wave network was about to materialize. The energy being transmitted was increasing, and it had already locked onto him. If he didn't escape now, he wouldn't have to waste any more effort. Go, go, go. He used a special method of control to give the human-faced arachnid in order to make it flee in a different direction. He hadn't forgotten what this group of people from the Ability User Society had been doing in Xia City for the past 2 days. If it wasn't for his several rounds of mental storms attracting hatred, this fellow would have been the #1 target of the Ability User Society's attack. Under his urging, the human-faced arachnid's 6 heterochromatic pupils finally recovered a bit of luster. It immediately leaped into the air and disappeared. The smoke man leaped out of the clock tower at nearly the same time. He flew towards the area where he could sense the most human traffic. He hoped to find a few human meat shields so that Ouyang Chen would have some fear. However, he was still a bit too late in the end. The instant the smoke man leaped out of the clock tower, a terrifying energy attack burst forth from the abandoned floor 1,500 meters away. In the next moment, a mental storm descended. This was absolutely revenge. It was also a mental storm, but this attack originated from Ouyang Chen. Even though it had lost many of its subtleties due to the long-distance transmission and guidance, when the hurricane swept over, it still caused the smoke soul body to fall into a predicament where it could not avoid. In a few breaths of time, the black smoke soul body, which was the soul of the out-of-body state, was torn to pieces. The soul of the black smoke man was directly exposed to the air, and was swept by the tail of the storm that blew past, almost causing his soul to scatter. In the end, his strength was strong and he had long since passed the naive age where his soul couldn't be exposed to the wind. He flew and descended all the way until he entered a certain nightclub in this group of buildings. Only in this noisy and chaotic atmosphere did he truly believe that he had escaped this calamity. Today's grazing was truly a huge failure. Ouyang Chen, this grudge has been formed. The smoke man was venting his anger as he sucked in a bit of people from the nightclub. He condensed a layer of darkness once more. Please turn the page if this chapter is not finished. The smoke soul body was temporarily coping. He was certain that he wouldn't die, so he began to worry about the human-faced arachnid situation. He sensed that the human-faced arachnid wasn't too far away from this area. It was still cruising in the outskirts. This was a bit dangerous. Oh, it had found its way here. The smoke man was actually somewhat gratified for a time. He had obtained this control method from another order. Even though its origins were unknown, the effects were quite good. If it wasn't like this, it would have been impossible to tame the human-faced arachnid to this degree within a short few days. The nightclub he was in was mostly filled with young men and women who had played all night. Emotions were born and turbid energy flowed everywhere. It was also a good place to hide the human-faced arachnid. Right now, the group of people from the Ability User Society would certainly not spare him. They would search everywhere for traces of the human-faced arachnid. His current strength was greatly damaged, so he had to first recover a bit of his vitality. At the same time, he had the people of the Order come over to receive him in order to ensure his safety. As he was pondering, the human-faced arachnid noiselessly pierced through this space and stopped by his side. Its appearance was malevolent and terrifying, but its 3 severed limbs made it appear to be in a rather sorry state. I don't know if the meal I just ate can make up for the vitality that this blade chopped off. It hadn't even been 2 days since the smoke man took over the human-faced arachnid. He still didn't understand the habits of this dark-sider life form too well. He made wild guesses for a time and was rather at a loss. He also observed even more carefully. Oh, the flames under the body of the human-faced arachnid were bright and translucent. They circulated with laws and rules. Could it be that the meal just now had already begun to digest? Right when he was sizing up the arachnid with interest, he saw a beam of light shoot out from the back of the human-faced arachnid. It tore open the back of the human-faced arachnid. The smoke man was stunned. The moment the beam of light came out, it was unstoppable. The light of fire exploded from every part of the human-faced arachnid's body. It was like thousands of sharp knives slicing and slicing. The human-faced arachnid could only struggle futilely. Then tongues of fire leaped out, burning its entire body. It burned into nothingness in the blink of an eye. The smoke man's mind was stupefied for a time as he observed this scene. It was completely blank. But then the raging flames of the fire burned the human-faced arachnid to death. Unexpectedly, they did not disperse. Instead, they converged inwards to form a maelstrom in the void. A boom rang out from within, and a malevolent and terrifying demon rode the light of fire. It soared out from within the maelstrom. Its 6 eyes were of a different color and its 8 legs were spread out. If it wasn't the human-faced arachnid, then who could it be? I wrote this chapter until 4 in the morning. Exactly 6 hours. I'm also drunk. I can only postpone the morning. I've temporarily finished paying off the subscriptions and chapters. Today I'll start paying off the monthly passes and chapters. Chapter 153. After the human-faced arachnid reappeared, it didn't make any movements. It just used its demonic 6 pupils to stare coldly at this fellow who was on the same level as it. The smoke man felt like he was having a nightmare. In the dream, it was the end of the world. When he woke up from the dream, everything returned to normal. He circled around the human-faced arachnid many times. He could see that the human-faced arachnid had undergone some changes before and after being burned by the raging flames. The most straightforward change was that the limb that Xuanhuan had chopped off had now grown back. The human-faced arachnid had the ability to rise from the ashes? Even if the smoke man's brain spun 300 times, he still wouldn't be able to think of something as bizarre and absurd as, a human-faced arachnid is hiding inside the belly of a human-faced arachnid. He only knew that nothing could happen to the human-faced arachnid in the hands of the Order. This was the key to the continued existence of the Blood Flame Order in the foreseeable future. The smoke man adjusted his emotions. He also adjusted the way his consciousness operated his energy and information, causing it to connect with the human-faced arachnid. The human-faced arachnid didn't resist, and so on. Soon, his consciousness cut into the deeper regions of the human-faced arachnid. He saw the terrifying scene of a furnace of flames. The smoke man heaved a sigh of relief. In the teachings of the Blood Flame Order he belonged to, the great blood flame was hidden deep within every person's anger, hatred, despair, and other intense emotions. It did not have a concrete form, nor did it have a clear self-consciousness. However, it possessed a powerful, terrifying, and absolute power, as well as a restless and unrestrained principle of operation. Therefore, after the Order obtained this human-faced arachnid, they projected the Order's most classic meditation environment here. They used it as a foundation to construct the basic structure of the future sacrificial vessel. Nothing seemed to have changed, but further verification was needed. The smoke man's consciousness continued to penetrate deeper, and soon a special voice was transmitted all the way from the depths of the sea of fire and magma. Blood, blood, blood. Fire, fire, fire. The monotonous and crazed shouts converged into a roar that made people anxious. But to this smoke man, it was instead very cordial and even more at ease. This was the prayer of the low-level believers of the Order. Naturally, the sound of a true prayer was much more complex. However, it was impossible to completely restore the structure of the human-faced arachnid. It could only be roughly categorized. The blood type was often related to hatred and resentment, while the fire type was more likely to seek excitement. From these cries of prayer, if this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. He knew that the blood-soul temple structure that the Order had implanted still existed. The foundation hadn't been lost and everything was fine. Through the blood-soul temple, he contacted the church. Soon, a deep and firm will gave him a response. "I'm here." Facing the officiator, the smoke man was completely relaxed. "Your Excellency, something happened in that matter before?" In fact, the officiator was fully aware of the hunt this time. When the smoke man accompanied the human-faced arachnid to hunt for food, he discovered that the target that had caused the human-faced arachnid to become restless was Jack. At the time, the smoke man couldn't make a good judgment. He discussed with the first to blade him and obtained permission before chasing after Jack to hunt. However, it was difficult for the officiator to predict what would happen next. After listening to the brief report, the officiant was not too surprised. He only said, "Amoluan, is our mold damaged?" The so-called mold referred to the human-faced arachnid. The smoke man was Amoluan. Fragments of the human-faced arachnid's rebirth from the ashes flashed through his mind. However, this matter was too complicated to explain. He just picked out the key points and gave a simple response. "No, it hasn't. It seems to have improved a bit." "It is indeed so. I can feel a sort of spiritual pressure here that I have never felt before. The order of the environment and the sense of hierarchy are also increasing. Even though order has never been the hobby of the mighty blood flame will, the path leading to it must always be divided into a distance and a height." "It is as you said." Amoluan's mood calmed down. The 40-year founding ceremony of the order is at hand. For the sake of restoring the order's glory, our actions are bound to be fraught with danger and risk. This is encouraged by the blood flame will. It is fine as long as the ultimate goal is achieved. The officiator calmly arranged, "There is already a soul envoy at your grazing location. I will send another one and a means of transportation. Your current mission is to escape the eye of the storm as soon as possible and bring our mold back safely." "As you wish, Your Excellency." Amoluan cut off the communication. His consciousness wandered into the depths of the Inferno prison. He was inexplicably lost in thought. It had already been 40 years. 40 years ago, when the Third World War was at its peak, the first officiator of the Blood Flame Order felt the mighty blood flame will amidst the despair of war. His ability was awakened, and he established the Blood Flame Order on the battlefield. It was one of the earliest modern secret orders in the world that could be verified. Amoluan was one of the founding elders of the order. At the time he was only 20 years old. This chapter is not yet complete. Please turn the page. He was a new recruit who had just stepped onto the battlefield. He obtained endless pleasure from the power of slaughter bestowed upon him by the blood flame. The rapid development of the order allowed him to obtain achievements that he had never dreamed of in his youth. As an old secret order, the blood flame had once had astonishing glory. Their followers covered nearly 2/3 of the world's major cities. They were one of the few world-class orders back then. However, good times did not last long. The overly intense and extreme teachings lost their vitality after losing the support of war and the environment of crisis. The order rapidly declined after the war, and the successive large changes in teachings, internal divisions, external affiliations, and other unforeseen events cut this powerful power into pieces. The branch that Amoluan belonged to could only withdraw into the region of Xia City. He relied on the impressive combat strength of the upper echelons to barely maintain the face of a secret order. And in the many years of change, the most important tool to realize the communication between the blood flame will and the lower echelons of believers, the order's sacrificial vessel, was unfortunately destroyed. This gave the order a heavy blow. The powerful sacrificial vessel was the pride of the blood flame order. It was the important inherited artifact that distinguished them from the wild fox order and the wild chicken order. It was precisely because of the sacrificial vessel that the lower echelons of the order possessed a regular channel of direct communication with the mighty blood flame will. They possessed the true feedback of divine ability manifestation and interference with reality. It was the best way to unite the hearts of the people and nurture the younger generation. Losing the sacrificial vessel was undoubtedly a fatal blow to an order that had established itself upon extraordinary strength. It was also a bitter humiliation. Nowadays their order was the same as those wild chicken orders. Every sacrificial activity, no matter how big or small, required the officiant to undertake and guide it. They used an artificial method to communicate with the blood flame will. The consumption was enormous. There were many restrictions and it was hard for people to be convinced. It became the greatest bottleneck that restricted the order's recovery and development. Amoluan had already had enough of these cursed days. He had experienced the most glorious period of the order. Because of this, he was particularly unable to endure the current state of decline. Now, the order had paid an enormous price from top to bottom in order to obtain a new method to obtain the sacrificial vessel. The human-faced arachnid was the crux of the crux. It absolutely could not be lost. Mighty blood flame will, I beseech you for your blessing. His consciousness completed a simple prayer within the furnace of hell. He was able to feel a response from a certain hazy will that came from the depths of the unseen void. Moreover, it was a clear response that was rarely seen in recent years. It was like a true deity looking down from high above. Chapter 154. Mo Luan needed to make a correction as soon as this thought was born. Forgive my stupidity. The basic teachings of the Blood Flame Order did not recognize the existence of personified gods in the world. They believed that the blood flame will existed within all personalities. Under certain conditions, the blood flame will would form dominance over all higher conscious life forms. As for the nature of the blood flame will, it was explained as the extreme side of nature. It was the pinnacle of power that could only be reached through the extreme paths of blood and fire. It was very difficult for such teachings to gain favor in the context of the modern world. Because of this, the order had carried out many revisions to its teachings over the course of several decades. It had also buried the seeds of a great split and a great collapse. Mo Luan was an elder of the order. He himself was more inclined towards the traditional teachings. He viewed the blood flame will as a guide towards the pursuit of eternal power. He believed more in self-will and pursuit than in deference and humility. But it was impossible to not be disturbed and influenced by the chaos of several decades. He attributed the weak thoughts he had just had to a moment of confusion and foolishness. He did his best to gather his mind and forget his thoughts just now. He carefully sensed what the first ablatum had just said. It was the feeling of layers within the furnace of hell. Sure enough, he discovered after paying attention that there was indeed a subtle difference in the current inferno compared to the blindly violent environment of before. Especially in the cries of blood and fire from the believers, there was already a subtle difference. Some fanatical and resolute voices were clearly clearer within the inferno. They aroused even more echoes. This clear feedback was enough to prove that the construction of the Order's sacrificial vessel had indeed begun to take an embryonic form. Mo Luan felt that tonight's hard work was worth it. His consciousness separated from the human-faced arachnid. His state of mind settled as he calmly waited for the arrival of the soul envoy. The human-faced arachnid stopped in the void next to Mo Luan. It was just as quiet, at least on the surface. Is this a dove occupying a magpie's nest? Or is it just wishful thinking? Luonan had truly watched a play in the past few minutes. He had gained new knowledge. Then he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What rebirth from the flames? It was just the wraith sign reappearing after devouring its own kind. The altar constructed by the wraith sign was a battlefield for its own kind to devour each other. The human-faced arachnid, who came from the same source, simply had no chance of refusing the altar. Then, if this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. It was only natural that the experienced wraith sign, who had the home advantage, easily won. This human-faced arachnid of the Blood Flame Order had been nourished by the Blood Flame summons of the Order's believers and the Blood Soul Temple's construction, but its core essence was limited in terms of growth and strength. There was a considerable disparity between it and the wraith sign, which had been tempered and upgraded by Ruewan. After the wraith sign swallowed Jack's spiritual seed first, the gap between them widened even further. It was only natural for it to fail. This once again confirmed that the human-faced arachnid was a darksider life form. It was unable to increase in strength through its own accumulation. It was unable to increase in strength through low-level food. The Blood Flame Order's method of grazing was actually correct. However, it was very unfortunate that they encountered the wraith sign, who was essentially on a different level from the other faced arachnid avatars. After swallowing Jack's spiritual seed, Luonan felt that the wraith sign might have already surpassed the wraith sign he encountered at the Limestone Water Village pub. At the very least, the wraith sign wasn't at a disadvantage. However, this Blood Flame Order was a bit outside of his expectations. Luonan didn't want to have any contact with this order. He didn't face it head-on when Mo Luan attacked the heavily chained crow. In any case, the altar constructed by the wraith sign had already taken control of the situation. Everyone split up and left, never to meet again. However, he never expected that the wraith sign would defeat its fellow human-faced arachnid and that the wraith sign would be busy receiving the fruits of victory. The remnant method of driving the human-faced arachnid's body would bring it back to the side of this mysterious power. The furnace of hell within the human-faced arachnid had already been completely incorporated into the framework of the altar. It was just that the wraith sign didn't have the time to retract it. Mo Luan was completely unaware of this. He used the format of pure consciousness to communicate, sense, pray and ponder. All of the energy and information circulated without the slightest bit of concealment. It was the same as displaying all of his secrets in one go. He wasn't much inferior to Jack. Grasping another person's secrets was very refreshing, but it was inevitable that he would burn his brain as to how to leave. He couldn't really let the wraith sign follow him back to be some sacrificial vessel. At this time, Hiyuan's call cut in on the psychic wave network, which had just recovered normal communications. "Scout, are you okay?" I'm fine." Luonan's soul body floated in the air to observe. He saw Hiyuan's tightly knitted brows as she communicated with him. Her brows relaxed after receiving a response. Luonan felt pretty good. "This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page." Actually, aside from the Wraith Sign's current dilemma, Luonan's current state wasn't just good. It was very good. It wasn't just good, it was great. He had borne the burden of another sacrificial activity. He had won with the Wraith Sign, who had a close connection with him. The direct benefits for Luonan far surpassed what happened to Ruewan. Of course, this didn't include soul breathing. In terms of the most intuitive range of mental senses, Luonan's range of senses began to rapidly recover the moment the mental storm stopped. The specific data had expanded by roughly 50 to 60%. The radius of his senses had nearly reached 800 meters. The expansion of the range of his senses proved that the amount of energy and information Luonan could control had increased by a large margin. His precision had increased as well. After his abilities increased, he always had a bit of a desire to show off. The society's hunt for the human-faced arachnid was probably about to begin. Luonan really was a bit eager to give it a try. What a joke. He was thinking whether or not he could borrow the society's hand to create an opportunity for the Wraith Sign to escape. Who knew that Hiyuan's next words would be, "The operation is over. Return immediately." You're not chasing? Chasing? Chasing who? The one who plotted against you. The one who interfered with the communications of the psychic wave network. Luonan really wanted to lead the society's power towards Mo Luan. His words were not without a hint of encouragement. Hiyuan was silent for a moment. Then she suddenly gestured to Giant Arm, Cragburst, and the others beside her. At the same time, her voice suddenly turned soft and gentle. It was as if she was afraid of alarming the enemy. "You saw him? Don't move no matter what. This person's strength is extremely powerful. Right now you're just a crow. Don't think about anything else. Let him go." Hold on. That person has already left. But he should still be in this group of buildings. Aren't we going to chase him? Hiyuan was startled. She gestured to Giant Arm and the others, who were already preparing to move, to stop. Her voice immediately returned to normal. She said resolutely and decisively, "You return immediately. Our mission for today is over." But Luonan didn't know what to say for a time. Of course he could see that Hiyuan's series of changes were all for the sake of his safety. But what about the Wraith Sign on Mo Luan's side? Today is only the third watch. Tomorrow will be the same. The year is afraid of mid-autumn and the moon is afraid of the middle of the night. I'll adjust my tempo to the fourth watch as soon as possible when I recover next week. Please forgive me. Chapter 155. Mr. Luo. Hiyuan changed the way she addressed Luonan, further indicating the end of the operation. She explained to Luonan, different mission objectives require different mission arrangements. They also require different executors. We are dealing with Jack's team. We are not suited to deal with the human-faced arachnid and the expert behind it. At the same time, the association has more or less locked on to the identity of the other party and will take follow-up measures to deal with it. But not at the moment. Luonan also knew that he shouldn't put his companions in danger for his own selfishness. He absolutely couldn't reveal the existence of the Wraith Sign to the outside world. In the end, he still needed to think of a way himself. Got it? I'll be right back. Luonan confirmed that Mo Luan wouldn't leave for a while, so he ordered Ink to return. Who would have thought that Hiyuan's next words would be, "Mr. Bai is here, just in time to check on the situation of your soul attachment." Luonan nearly let Ink knock its head against the clock tower. Hiyuan had mentioned Mr. Bai back in the fighting arena. Luonan hadn't paid much attention to it, but now the feeling was different. Don't look at how passive Mr. White was when he faced Mo Luan. However, on the mental plane, his light muslin and misty infiltration method was extremely exquisite. Ink's situation couldn't be hidden from others. It wouldn't be a big deal if his soul-leaving body was exposed, but after going through so much trouble for so long, it would still be awkward if it was exposed again. Luonan really didn't have a good solution. He could only take it one step at a time. As they spoke, Hiyuan and the others began to clean up the battlefield. Although the process was a bit tortuous, the people who participated in the operation all escaped unscathed, and the atmosphere was still relatively relaxed. The injured and unconscious Ruewen had already been carried into the prepared battlefield ambulance and given emergency treatment to reduce radiation damage. On the other side, Jack's body was also moved back. A group of people gathered around to study it. It was said to be a corpse, but it was actually the Deep Blue Walker's exoskeleton armor. At this moment, whether it was inside or outside, it was a mess. All sorts of remnants of human tissues and destroyed spare parts could be seen. It felt like a pile of garbage. It was impossible to see the might he'd displayed when he'd fought Cragburst and Giant Arm. At this moment, the sound of flapping wings could be heard. Ink flapped its wings and entered through the window of the abandoned building. Compared to its own kind, its enormous size and astonishing speed were rather eye-catching, attracting the attention of the people who were cleaning up the battlefield. Mr. Bai, who had been recuperating, raised his head. He didn't say anything, but his smoke-like will spread out from the depths of the void. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Locked onto Crow. Luo Nan hurriedly let Ink descend to the ground where Mr. Bai was sitting. At the same time he greeted through the hex ear, "Hello Mr. Bai. I've troubled you." He felt like he was a patient seeking treatment, and Mr. Bai was the highly skilled doctor. Mr. White grinned. This little old man, who was famous for his dream technique, was always in a slack and sleepy state. He sat on the ground with his back bent as if he could fall asleep at any time. However, under Mr. White's half-lidded eyelids, his eyes were extremely bright. Along with the smoke that filled the air in the spiritual plane, he covered Ink's body. Very quickly he let out an "oh." Xuanhuan and Cragburst had walked over even earlier, but they maintained a certain distance in order to avoid disturbing Mr. White's observations. Cragburst was the first to make the judgment of spiritual attachment when he saw Mr. White's reaction. He couldn't help but ask, "How is it? Is it spirit attachment or soul attachment?" "I can't tell for now." Mr. White was quite frank, but he immediately praised, "It's a bit different from what I thought before. Little Luo's way of doing things is quite reasonable. His methods are cautious and strict. He has his own standards. Not bad, not bad." Luo Nan didn't hide anything. In the eyes of an ability user of Mr. White's level, it was impossible for him to miss the faint radiance of the diagram structure under the cover of the crow's black feathers as long as he paid careful attention. Xuanhuan and Cragburst also discovered this situation one after the other. Xuanhuan hesitated for a moment before saying, "Format? Thank you for swallowing the archetype." Luo Nan secretly sighed with emotion. Yen Hong's archetype formatting theory was indeed deeply ingrained in burners, including ability users. It wasn't something that could be reversed in a short amount of time. Cragburst scratched his head. "I don't think this diagram was there in the beginning, but I did see it when I was rushing over here." Luo Nan rushed to explain, "I just realized it not too long ago. It's mainly for adjusting my state." Xuanhuan set the tone with a single sentence, "Is there any danger? Common sense says that the more there is a method, the lower the risk. But we can't make a conclusion lightly." Mr. Bai stood up as he spoke, "How about this? The matters here are more or less settled. I'll make a trip to the hospital with little Luo since I have nothing better to do. I'll give it a try and take a look. It's better than anything else." Xuanhuan said, "That would be best. I'll arrange a car." Don't be fooled by Mr. Bai's slack and sloppy appearance. Once he took action, he was truly swift and decisive. And he did it in a straightforward manner. This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page. Luo Nan didn't have the time to express too much before he was brought onto the flying car that headed towards Xia City's Renai Hospital. Luo Nan didn't really care about anything else. The only thing that worried him was the distance between him and the Wraith sign. Luckily, the connection between the two was still stable and secretive up to this point. Mr. Bai asked Luo Nan many questions along the way. The main questions were about how to establish a relationship with the crow, how to control it, and so on. Luo Nan saw that there was a way, so he took the initiative to talk about the origin of ink. He spoke half-truths and half-lies. "I sensed ink at the time and locked onto it. Then I felt like my soul had left my body. This was an ambush for the possibility of him being exposed later on." However, Mr. Bai clearly didn't think that much. He laughed out loud when he heard Luo Nan's words, "Out-of-body state? Young man, don't bite off more than you can chew. You still haven't awakened. Even if you can go out for a short while, you'll be blown apart in the blink of an eye. That'll be the scattering of your soul. There's no saving you." Is that dangerous? From ancient times until now, the price has been disastrous. Mr. Bai shook his head and sighed. In the old ancestors' world, the out-of-body state is also called summoning the yin soul. There are quite a few taboos. Those who do it rashly don't have a good ending. Since you have this sort of feeling, there's no harm in reading the Taoist books that the society has organized and revised. It's good to be able to use them as reference. I remember now. Luonan finally understood why Crag burst, Yuan, and Mr. Bai didn't think about the out-of-body state. This was because they all considered things from common sense. They absolutely never imagined that Luonan would have an external fuel tank like the Wraith sign by his side. It could provide long periods of endurance. While Luonan and Mr. Bai were conversing, Luonan's soul body relied on its ghostly speed to arrive at Xia City's Renai Hospital half a step ahead. Wanting to rely on this Crow Inc. to recover Luonan's senses was undoubtedly like trying to fish from a tree. Luonan needed to first resolve this problem in order to avoid awkwardness when the time came. Luonan relied on his subtle connection with his main body. He didn't need to deliberately sense it. His mind stirred and his soul returned to his main body. At this moment, the mental plane and the material plane converged. It was like a stone being thrown down from a high place. It vibrated with a bang, bringing out circle after circle of ripples. Luonan opened his eyes amidst these ripples that penetrated his body. He gazed at the monotonous patterned ceiling of the hospital and grinned, but then his expression froze. Luonan felt a sharp pain between his eyebrows in an instant. A small hole had split open on the thin layer of skin in front of his forehead. Blood seeped out from within. Chapter 156. Luonan didn't dare to move at all. His entire body was as stiff as a block of wood. But even this wasn't enough. It wasn't just his forehead. His scalp, cheeks, shoulders, and many other parts of his body felt like his muscles were being torn apart. Furthermore, the pain was still spreading. It was as if his body had suddenly turned into a thin bag filled with razor blades. Any slight movement would cause thousands of blades to pierce through his body. His soul and body were in serious disharmony. Luonan's insight and knowledge had greatly improved. He was able to grasp the root of the illness in an instant. He had once heard Yuan mention the serious problem of the imbalance between the mind and the body, but it was only a conceptual understanding. Now he had finally experienced it for himself. Originally, his soul and physical body came from the same source and fused into one. Their energy and information were interlinked and operated in sync. Naturally, there was a relatively harmonious rhythm. Even if there was something out of line, it was still within the range of adjustment. However, Luonan's soul strength had received 2 consecutive benefits from the sacrificial offering in a single night. His soul strength had grown substantially, and he had also comprehended the mysteries of soul breathing. The corresponding changes in the operating form of energy and information were practically revolutionary. After his soul and body became one, this transformation was quickly reflected in his body. An increase in soul strength was a good thing, and soul breathing was an even better thing. It represented Luonan's current highest achievement in the mutual interference of the mental and material planes, the circulation and utilization of energy and information. The problem was that the material foundation of the soul and the fleshly body was ultimately different. From the display of the Dynamo Core's Tower of Babel, it could be seen that the soul was more or less a composition structure of energy and information. As long as the basic structure operated well, no matter how complicated the adjustments were, it could often be done with a single thought. However, the physical body was limited to basic physical properties. The various functional systems and organs had different carrying capacities and tolerances. The transmission of energy and information also required the action of a variety of chemical substances, which involved an extremely complex integrated system. Luonan started with the nervous system. He used various nerve drugs, walking on the line between life and death. He used a full 5 years of time before he was able to adjust the structure of his body to the requirements of the format of "My Heart's a Prison." How was it possible for him to keep up with the new rhythm of soul breathing within a second? Only by comparison could one see the disparity. At this time, one could see the heaven-defying nature of Ruiwen's body. He didn't look particularly strong, but he was able to keep up with the changes in the rhythm of his soul. No matter how extreme the situation was, he was able to withstand it. This was already far beyond that of an ordinary person. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The category of such functions. There was no point in being envious. That attack just now had only torn his muscles. Luonan should be rejoicing. If there was a problem with his fragile and sensitive nervous system or endocrine system, his body system might shut down on the spot, or he might experience some unpredictable developmental changes. There was no point in rejoicing. If this situation were to continue, then Luonan's worries would have an extremely high probability of occurring. "Hey Xiao Luo, are you distracted?" Mr. Bai's voice was transmitted through the hexa ear, making Luonan remember that he was still following Mr. Bai to the hospital. He could already see the building of the hospital at this time. Luonan gave up on the headache-inducing matter for now. He used an excuse he had already thought of to deal with it. "My main body seems to be reacting." "This is very good." Mr. White was a bit surprised, but he was also very happy. This means that the connection between your soul and your body is very close. Many problems can be eliminated. "Come, let's strike while the iron is hot." As he spoke, Mr. White opened the car window and signaled for ink to fly out. "Go back to your original body and see if you can do it. I contacted the association in the hospital and got a temporary identity. It would be easier for me to communicate with them later. Let's keep in touch." These words were in line with Luonan's intentions. He immediately gave a word of thanks to Mr. Bai and urged Ink to flap its wings to fly in the direction of the hospital. Ink accurately found Luonan's room and stopped outside the window. 2 seconds passed before it reported the good news to Mr. Bai. "There are no problems on my side." In this way the entire play was done perfectly and flawlessly. If one ignored the huge problem of the imbalance between body and soul. Mr. Bai also laughed out loud. "It's best if it was a false alarm. Right now it's the latter half of the night. Take a rest first and catch your breath. We'll meet again during the morning ward rounds. Call me Professor Bai at that time." Luonan actually wanted to consult this authority on soul studies about the problem of the imbalance between body and soul. But the play had already been played to this degree. Some words were really hard to grasp. In the end he was used to being introverted. After a moment of hesitation, his telepathic thoughts automatically responded, "Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bai." The communication between the two was cut off for the time being. Luonan spoke with He Yuan and Cragburst, telling them to be at ease. After a round of notifications, Luonan shifted his attention back to his own body. The tearing sensation of his muscles spreading a step further. This was a concrete sensation. It was hard to say what the state of his internal organs were like without pain nerves. Luonan sighed. "This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page." He took a breath. He needed to be careful with this sort of movement. If he made a mistake he might tear again. This was definitely not good. It wasn't paralysis. It was even worse than paralysis. What in the world was that hesitation just now? Luonan felt that he had done something stupid. In the end he wasn't a true idiot who wouldn't turn back until he hit the wall. He knew that he absolutely couldn't afford to be stupid in this sort of matter. He immediately tried to contact Mr. Bai again. But at this time, the Wraith Sign's message came back from a nightclub several dozen kilometers away. The situation there had changed. Mo Luan of the Blood Flame Order had made the motion of controlling the human-faced arachnid. This human-faced arachnid wasn't the human-faced arachnid. The Blood Flame Order's method of controlling the human-faced arachnid was now only an empty shell. It was a bit difficult for the Wraith Sign, who lacked intelligence, to understand Mo Luan's intentions. Luonan sighed once more. His soul left his body, temporarily breaking away from the bindings of his fleshly body. He responded to the changes in the situation over there with all his strength. Luonan had a general understanding of the situation over there through the Wraith Sign. The reason why Mo Luan wanted to control the human-faced arachnid was because 2 soul envoys had arrived. Mo Luan didn't know that the Ability User Society didn't have any intentions of continuing to chase and kill him for now. They were still proceeding strictly according to the Order's evacuation plan. The so-called soul envoys looked like a young man and woman who loved to play around. They were no different from the majority of the people still lingering in the nightclub. However, when the man and woman entered the room where Mo Luan and the human-faced arachnid were, they immediately knelt to the ground after confirming the location, even though they couldn't see the scene on the mental plane. They silently prayed. Their bodies inexplicably swayed during the process of praying. They became dizzy and then they fell one after another, losing all consciousness. Luonan could clearly see that all of their conscious activities had vanished from the moment they lost consciousness. Right now the man and woman on the ground were simply 2 empty shells of fleshly bodies. Or perhaps it could be said that they were vessels. Mo Luan's intentions were already as clear as day now. Sure enough, Mo Luan controlled the Wraith Sign next. He wanted it to enter the body of the female soul envoys, borrowing the aura of life to conceal itself to the greatest degree. As for Mo Luan himself, He threw himself into the fleshly body of the male soul envoys without the slightest trace of politeness. Though the male soul envoys was in a state of unconsciousness, his body still shook violently. He nearly fell limply to the ground. A thin bloody wound had split open on his temple, and the surrounding blood vessels throbbed. It's the third watch today and the second watch after that. By the time I get back from the county, it'll be evening. Chapter 157. It was as if Luonan was looking at a reenactment of the difficult problem he had encountered in the past. Judging from the current situation, it was clear that the soul envoy's body couldn't bear the infusion of Mo Luan's soul energy and was damaged. How would Mo Luan solve this problem? In the event of an accident, he couldn't command the soul envoy who could be cut into pieces at any time to fight, could he? With the wraith sign acting as a fulcrum and cover, Luonan opened his god perspective to conduct a comprehensive observation of Mo Luan. Mo Luan was completely unaware of this. He adjusted step by step, allowing the soul envoy to gradually adapt to the infusion of soul power. Luonan had already exposed his method of operating energy and information back at the wraith sign. Luonan observed and guessed, and he was able to figure out most of Luonan's steps. Is that so? Luonan was like an apprentice. He followed the movements of his instructor and began to try them out. The first is self-limitation. He adjusted the rhythm of his soul's breathing and slowed down the speed and efficiency of his energy and information circulation. He even intentionally blocked some of them to reduce the enormous pressure on his body. The range of Luonan's mental senses began to greatly shrink. From a radius of 800 meters, it shrunk all the way to less than 10 meters. At this point it was only about 1% of the soul's spiritual senses. No matter what, it couldn't shrink any further. This was the bottom line for maintaining the soul's current configuration and rhythm. It was a basic unit. But even so, it was nearly twice as large as the 5-meter radius yesterday morning, and the information processing pressure was still not small. This was the second step, keeping a distance. Luonan followed Mo Luan's method and let his soul lean into the depths of the mental plane. He maintained a state that was neither close nor distant from his fleshly body. Well, it was like he was dreaming. Mo Luan had used this method to reduce the pressure on the spirit envoy's body. However, the biggest problem was that the information exchange between the material and the spiritual plane was somewhat stagnant, which affected the secretion of some neurotransmitters. His mind was in a trance, similar to sleepwalking or even taking drugs. In the end, this was only a temporary measure, and it wasn't a permanent solution. Luonan was a bit disappointed. But in any case, this method helped him extricate himself from his awkward state of paralysis. After Mo Luan completed the sending soul, he did not rush to leave the nightclub. Instead, he took the magic talisman out of the box and wandered around the nightclub. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. He walked around, adjusting the soul attachment form to the best state. Luonan temporarily lost the value of observation and his mind flowed back. He could not help but yawn, nearly falling asleep. He didn't want to use sleep to scare people anymore, so he suppressed his sleepiness and sat up on the bed unsteadily. Faint sunlight shone through the curtains into the room. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was morning. Luonan thought about the twists and turns and chaos of the first half of the night and the flow of time during this time. The stark contrast between before and after made Luonan feel rather emotional for a time. He took another deep breath, but when he was halfway through, the itchiness in his throat suddenly exploded, and the airflow diverged, choking him to death. He coughed repeatedly and almost couldn't breathe. At this moment, the communicator at the head of the bed rang on its own, and his aunt's extremely surprised voice came through. "Nan, you're awake." He wanted to greet his aunt, but his violent cough made it impossible for Luonan to open his mouth. He could only force himself to raise his hand in response. The intensive care unit that Luonan was in was specially arranged by the society through the hospital. It was monitored 24 hours a day and it was equipped with both professional and robotic care. Actually, the basic purpose was to refuse the company of his family, to make room for the following operations. Because of the hospital's regulations, Mrs. Luo Shuqing could only use online video to check on Luonan's current situation. She never expected to see Luonan turn over and sit up the first time she checked on him in the early morning. This was a pleasant surprise and it was no small matter. But when she saw Luonan's situation of endless coughing, she couldn't help but worry. Right when she was about to call for medical personnel, the door to the ward was pushed open, and a mighty procession of doctors and nurses came in. The daily routine ward round had begun. Mr. Bai was astonishingly among the crowd, and he was in the center position. Luonan's attending physician had to address this little old man, who had casually put on a white coat, as Professor Bai. He was extremely respectful. "Oh, the little fellow is awake. This saves us quite a bit of trouble." A nurse came forward to do a routine examination while Mr. Bai was joking. She pulled out the monitoring data from last night for Mr. Bai to look through. Mr. Bai had long since determined what happened last night. He just scanned the data and continued to joke with Luonan. "What's going on with your forehead? You didn't wake up from the fall, right?" The wound on Luonan's forehead was a tear in the epidermis. Please continue to the next page if this chapter doesn't end. The wound had already scabbed over and stopped bleeding. It looked as if he had been hung by something. There was only a shallow wound on his forehead, which was more eye-catching. "Cough. I don't know where I hit it." Luonan still couldn't stop coughing. His words were intermittent. Mr. Bai walked over with a beaming smile. He checked Luonan's body's condition step by step. In other words, he rolled his eyelids and so on. At the same time, Mr. Bai's voice transmitted into Luonan's hexa ear, "Idiot. Shouldn't you be saying something like, 'Why am I here?' Cough. Why am I here?" Luonan's mind had always been dizzy due to the side effects of the blood pressure reduction. He really did say whatever he was told to say. He was extremely obedient. Mr. Bai was very happy. Luonan's age was indeed more than enough to be his grandson. He immediately patted Luonan's head in passing, expressing, "This child is worth teaching." Then he said, "It's nothing. This kid must have been under a lot of pressure recently. He's a bit mentally weak. His parents are here, right? Report the situation later. I'll be right downstairs." Mrs. Luo Shuqing didn't go home yesterday. She stayed at a hotel near the hospital. She informed her husband when she saw that Luonan was awake. Then she rushed over. She watched the entire process of the hospital examination through a video feed. She hurried to give a response through the communication device at the head of the bed. "No rush. No rush." Mr. Bai spoke with his mouth, but he grabbed Luonan's two hands. He indicated for Luonan to open up his left hand between his thumb and forefinger. His right thumb gently kneaded and pressed. He demonstrated the contact points, technique, and strength. "You're coughing badly. Just deal with it like this for now. Concentrate your mind. Don't be distracted." "Okay." Luonan did as he was told. Sure enough, the symptoms of his coughing were somewhat alleviated. He nodded in agreement on the spot. Mr. Bai walked out with his hands behind his back, beaming with smiles. However, the connection with the hexa ear was never cut off. He shared information with Luonan, letting Luonan know of his upcoming journey. Mr. Bai symbolically checked a few more patients before meeting with Mrs. Luo Shuqing. The following words were different from what he said in the ward. "Looking at the situation, it can be preliminarily confirmed that it's a disorder of the autonomic nervous system. It's caused by great pressure or anger." "Did you vent your anger on your family last night?" Mr. Bai adopted the attitude of a charlatan. He asked a question he already knew the answer to. He immediately drew Mrs. Luo Shuqing into a trap. Chapter 158. No. It's because of what happened outside. Luo Shuqing thought of the scene in the restaurant last night. She couldn't help but feel her chest tighten and her breath quicken. She ground her teeth to pieces. What more Luonan, who had his neck strangled by that bastard? Mr. Bai nodded. "No matter what, the symptoms have already manifested. The next problem is treatment. You did an examination at Anhai's place yesterday, which basically explained the situation. The patient has two special points. One is that he is in his puberty period. The other is that he has a history of hereditary diseases. These all need to be considered. Under the influence of incorrect information, even a capable person like Ms. Luo Shuqing could only be manipulated by others." Her mind was restless. She asked, "You mean?" "My general recommendation is that there is no treatment. Taking medicine is not a good method for a child like this. Instead, he should rely on environmental regulation and self-regulation. At this stage, a family atmosphere is very important. Self-control is also very important. Simply speaking, it is to relax, recuperate, and follow a routine of work and rest. It is not recommended that he engage in heavy physical and mental activities. Of course, the current symptoms of drowsiness, coughing, and so on need to be interfered with to avoid affecting his quality of life. How about this? First, stay in the hospital for 2 days. Soak in a nutrition pod and do some psychological counseling. Let him learn how to relax." Ms. Luo Shuqing didn't respond, but Luonan could no longer hold it in. Mr. Bai, why do I need to stay in the hospital? Because you really are sick. Your autonomic nerves have been damaged. Mr. Bai deserved to be called an authority in the study of souls. His mental cultivation was deep. He could multitask with plenty of time. The sudden cough is the most obvious evidence. Also, are you very thirsty right now? Who are you showing this early in the morning? Who are you trying to impress with your drooping eyes? For a young man who can already use Soul Host to show these symptoms, it's obvious that there is a problem with his physiology. Luonan was speechless for a moment. He watched as Mr. Bai made his aunt willingly go through the procedures with just a few words. He pondered for a long time before speaking. Is it because of the imbalance of body and soul? It's good that you know your place. Mr. Bai sighed. I can see that you are very talented in the study of souls. You learned it yourself and you can use Soul Host to soul attach. This chapter is not finished. But which part of his body had been enlightened? Why did his spiritual cultivation improve again? I just tested it. Your ability on the spiritual level is quite unique. Even I can't delve too deeply into it so as to avoid causing more stimulation. But the more it was like this, the more troublesome it was. One had to know that compared to the soul, the improvement of the body was too small, and it was very easy to be left behind. In ancient times, many senior experts abandoned their bodies because of the imbalance in the progress of their souls and bodies. They were either self-righteous or had no choice but to abandon their bodies. In the end, they were reduced to wandering ghosts, their bodies and souls destroyed. We can't be careless about this. Luonan felt very wronged. He knew the reasoning behind this, but his soul strength had skyrocketed overnight. Was this still his fault? Well, there was no need for him to mention this particular symptom to Mr. White. Luonan tried asking, is it okay to start training now? Mr. White snorted and said, you sick man? The most important thing now was to recuperate. Ren AI Hospital's nutrition cabin was very effective. Let's go through a course of treatment first to see the effect. Don't worry. It's not the usual common goods. It's the Society's special nutrient fluid. This is considered a work injury. Wait until the observation period is over. If you want to get better results, you can contact the Society's high-level pharmacists. 1 or 2 points should be enough to get someone to concoct medicine for you. Alright, you just joined the Society. Do you know what honor points are? Yes, I do. But I still need to use medicine? Luonan had long seen that Mr. White was a humorous person who didn't bother with trifles. He was also a warm-hearted person. Luonan relaxed a lot when he spoke. Then why did you say that there was no cure? I was afraid that your parents would give you the common goods on the market. Let's not talk about whether the target is right or not. If the stimulation is too light or too heavy, the situation will become more troublesome. What do? Mr. White immediately introduced Luonan to the situation of several high-level pharmacists in the society. But Luonan heard a few words and sleepiness bubbled up in his mind. He was a bit unable to calm down. He answered in a daze, how's Brother Octopus? Octopus. You're familiar with him? Mr. White sensed Luonan's state, but he didn't take it to heart. He just spoke truthfully, that kid isn't bad, but he specializes in hallucinations and potential stimulation. This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page. We don't get along in this situation. But as a pharmacist, his connections are stronger than mine. You can consult his opinion. Luonan's impression of this warm-hearted and selfless old man grew more and more favorable. He promptly expressed his thanks. Mr. White emphasized a few taboos that Luonan needed to pay attention to. Then he let Luonan sleep first. This would make it convenient for the hospital to do further examinations. Luonan really couldn't hold on any longer. He gave his thanks again and fell onto the bed. Who knew that a new message would come from the Hexier at this time? It was a brief report on last night's mission. From Luonan's understanding, a brief report meant honor points. He was about to use it, so he suppressed his sleepiness and opened it to read. It looked like this brief report was Yuan's work. It was concise and clear. Luonan skimmed through the description of the course of the operation. Then he looked at his own evaluation and points. Luonan's performance in this operation was mainly in discovering problems in the early stages. And in the early stages of the operation, he excelled in completing the reconnaissance mission. He created the conditions for the Society to successfully stop Jack. He didn't show anything else clearly, so his evaluation was a bit lower than last time. It was C+. His honor points were at 3 points. He was still in the first echelon. His current honor points had already reached 7 points. His accumulation speed was quite astonishing. It looked like he needed to seriously understand the society's shop. Luo Nan soon flipped to the end of the brief report, but he discovered that the format of the brief report was slightly different from last time. This time's brief report even had a link to spoils of war attached. He opened it and found out that the society had a spoils of war auction system. That is, the spoils of war would be displayed in an operation that yielded spoils of war. The members participating in the operation would bid based on their evaluation and determine who the spoils of war belonged to. As for the spoils of war this time, they were, of course, mainly obtained from Jack. They included a medium transport vehicle, deep blue walker exoskeleton armor, remains, detection scanner equipment, body modification parts secondhand, and so on. Of course, the most eye-catching item was naturally the deep-sea Type 4 dynamo core. Luo Nan stared at this interface for a long time before he finally couldn't hold back. He coughed and laughed. He was very happy. Yen Yongbua should be very anxious. Chapter 159. Luo Nan paid the most attention to the deep-sea Type 4 dynamo core within the series of spoils of war. He remembered watching the scene from the sidelines. After the dynamo core lost the stimulation of energy and information, the separated filaments were retracted one after another. The wheat seed structure also became loose, returning to a 4 to 5 centimeter thin needle. It was very similar to his external neuron. A cutting-edge product that might very well be of the same origin as the external neuron in his possession, a direct clue that might very well be related to his father's whereabouts. Luo Nan was extremely interested in these spoils of war just based on this point. Moreover, Luo Nan had watched the entire negotiation process between Jack and Yen Yongbua. Naturally, he knew the value of the dynamo core and its related technology. At the very least, in the eyes of those who were observant, even if all the other spoils of war were to be combined together, they wouldn't even be worth half a fraction of it. The first thing Luo Nan did was to look at the bidding situation for the dynamo core. However, the bidding description showed that the spoils of war were still in the evaluation phase. It seemed that the society was unable to determine its value. Jack's brain nucleus was also being evaluated. This was a little surprising. The brain nucleus was admittedly an important processing center for the altered human, providing high-level thinking and emotional templates. However, it was still a mass-produced product after all. There was no reason for it to be placed on the same level as the dynamo core. Oh wait, I remember that this thing was wrapped inside the dynamo core? Luo Nan recalled the situation at the time. After the dynamo core had removed its metal wheat seed form, it had indeed dropped this brain core. Even earlier, when the Wraith sign probed Jack's brain, it discovered that the dynamo core was also surrounding the brain nucleus. It was unknown if there were any special requirements inside. There were too many mysteries surrounding Jack. Thinking back to last night, he had originally wanted to find out more about Yen Yongbua, but a freak combination of factors had caused such a huge scene. Jack was one of the most important catalysts. The Deep Blue World and the Apocalypse Laboratory were all unheard of. If Jack hadn't exposed them, how would Luo Nan have known of these things? After Jack's death, many clues were lost. He wondered if the association could put in more effort and dig out more relevant information? If this didn't work, Luo Nan would have to do it himself. He was pondering over Jack's secrets when a sudden connection suddenly cut in. It was Crag Burst. Hello? Hello. Scout, are you feeling better? How does it feel to have a good sleep? I still want to sleep. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Luo Nan and Crag Burst's friendship was extraordinary thanks to Knight's close cooperation. Still sleeping? Ruiwen is the same, even worse than you. She has never woken up, but her injuries are much more serious than yours. With that kind of injury, there's no harm in sleeping more. Though they weren't placed together, Luo Nan knew more about Ruiwen than anyone else through the intermediary effect of the format pyramid. According to his deduction, it would be difficult for the girl to wake up within the next 2 days. This little girl, Ruiwen, had an innate ability to sense danger. Even when she was unconscious, it was still operating instinctively. During continuous battles, the rhythm of her body and soul was directed towards rapid recovery. However, once the situation slowed down, the rhythm would become extremely slow. It was as if she wanted to take a long nap to conserve her energy. Luo Nan really needed to learn this method of making precise adjustments according to the changes in the external environment. Alright, you want to play bidding? Luo Nan jumped in fright from this fellow. Even his sleepiness was swept away a bit. How did you know? Look at the interface. It's clear who's online and who's paying attention. You don't even know this. You're just a rookie and you still want to compete with others for money? Cragburst laughed loudly. Luonan knew that he had made a mistake, but he didn't let go of the opportunity to understand his opponent. He asked directly, "Which one have you taken a fancy to?" "I'm not interested in any of them. They don't match with my abilities and hobbies." Cragburst responded quite straightforwardly. "Then why are you looking? If I can trick someone, why wouldn't I look?" Cragburst laughed again. "It looks like the middleman hasn't found you yet. Perhaps your information is classified and he can't find a breakthrough point for now." "Middleman? Even if you don't ask, I'll still remind you. Look, you're a psychic. You're a mentally enhanced ability user. You have nothing to do with altered people or anything like that. I'm afraid that not many of these spoils of war have caught your eye." Luonan hesitated for a moment, but he still responded to Cragburst's words. Cragburst talked non-stop as he explained, "But for our society, aside from going to the wilderness for a big gamble, there aren't many situations in which we can see so many spoils of war within the city. The right to bid, especially the right to bid in the first wave, is truly rare. If we use it carelessly or miss it, then it would truly be a waste." When Luonan heard this, "Please flip the page if this chapter doesn't end," he understood. "You're talking about purchasing. There's someone in the society who has taken a fancy to the items inside. They want to trade for them." "Smart. But I need to add one more thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone from the society. Even outsiders can do it." "Of course they can. As long as they can bring out goods that move people's hearts, then they can exchange what they need. The cutting-edge technological equipment we obtain this time is quite popular in the market. There are already 2 or 3 parties who have expressed interest, especially the 2 items that are currently being evaluated. Even I'm moved by their conditions." Luonan's mind had been preoccupied with something. Hearing this immediately stirred an extremely sensitive chord and he blurted out, "It can't be Yen Yongbua, right?" "Yen Yongbua? No, it's an intermediary company." Wait a minute. The news came out too fast. The briefing is still hot. Cragburst's temperament was straightforward, but he wasn't an idiot. He clapped his hands on the spot. "Don't say it. It's really possible." Luonan grinned. "I don't want to do as he wishes." Cragburst naturally knew of Luonan's attitude towards Yen Yongbua. His interest was immediately piqued. "I'll go check it out. Wait for my news. If it's true, then the way we do things will be different." He excitedly hung up the call and went to work. Luonan muttered to himself for a moment. He set the bidding for the dynamo core, including the brain core, to be watched immediately. He exited the interface of the hexier. Right now he was lying on his bed, blinking his eyes. Though drowsiness surged forth like a tide, he felt as if he had missed something. "Oh, that's right." He turned his head. The split-page notebook that never left his side lay peacefully on the headboard of his bed. The pitch-black cover was like the entrance to a tunnel leading to an unknown direction. Luonan leaned against the headboard and sat up. He flipped open the notebook to the flexible e-ink screen page. He swept his eyes over the other icons and stopped on the visualization diagram. The visualization diagram icon that had just been displayed on Friday night was still in the download and install state. However, the area that glowed faintly seemed to have increased by a tiny bit. Sure enough, when he mentally injected it, the percentage of completion displayed had jumped from 2% to 6%. Should he be happy for the sake of a 3-fold increase? Luonan shook his head and his finger brushed across the flexible screen. The interface turned off and a slender needle was drawn out from within the flexible screen without a sound. "The next update will be around 2 in the morning. Everyone don't wait. Let's see it tomorrow morning." Chapter 160. Luonan focused his gaze on this dynamo core that he had long since possessed. Compared to the Deep-Sea Type 4, Luonan was certain that this dynamo core was nearly twice the length of the Deep-Sea Type 4. And clairvoyance on the mental plane could see that the electricity flowing on the dynamo core was much more intense. It was probably because the model was different, but he didn't know how to address it. From Luonan's current perspective, this toy, the dynamo core, was truly very peculiar. It possessed a feeling of substance on the material plane, yet it constantly affected the mental plane. The mental and the material interfered with each other, blurring the positioning of its material. It was as if the dynamo core existed in the crevice between the mental and material planes. There were simply too many things worth studying. Luonan let the dynamo core merge with his brain while he pondered. He wanted to try and see if he could be like Jack and activate this toy. Since it's an activation, we should give it some stimulation. Luonan wasn't like Jack. He didn't have a dedicated power transmission line, so he was unable to provide enormous electrical support. All he had was soul energy. He didn't know what to do either. He simply let his soul power seep in and it quickly turned into a form of observation. The range of his spiritual senses shrank rapidly in exchange for an increase in accuracy. But for now, no matter how much the range shrank, it was still locked within a range of 10 meters. No matter how much his accuracy increased, it was still swaying around the millimeter level. His best record was still some distance away from 1/10 of a millimeter. This obviously wouldn't work. If one were to use the standards of cutting-edge technology to determine the precision of the dynamo core's craftsmanship, it would at least be at the nanometer level. That was 1/millionth of a millimeter precision, which was close to the atomic scale. Just thinking about it made one despair. However, Luonan still knew that within the dynamo core, there existed an inconceivable subbrain chip within the neuron-like structure of the cell body. It bore the burden of a huge amount of coding, translation, and calculation tasks. The reason he knew all this was because last week, the dynamo core had grown to a certain degree under the support of the abundant energy of the independent power station of the Gear Laboratory. Providing a huge amount of energy was obviously a more direct and effective method. Compared to an independent power station, Luonan's individual strength was negligible. Of course, the dynamo core did not respond. Sure enough, it's not that easy. If I can get Jack's dynamo core application technology and use it on myself, it shouldn't be considered as a cyborg, right? Luonan fell into a deep sleep with this thought in mind. However, less than half an hour later, he suddenly opened his eyes and moaned. This won't do, it's too dangerous. The method that Mo Luan provided was indeed only a temporary measure. It wasn't completely correct. Luonan, in order to lose weight. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Lightening the pressure on the body, making the soul and the physical body inseparable, tilting the soul deeper into the mental plane. At first it was fine. The pressure on the body was reduced. Other than lethargy, coughing, and occasional shortness of breath, there were no other symptoms. But as time passed and he gradually fell asleep, the side effects of his soul delving deeper into the spiritual plane appeared. Chaotic to chaotic. No matter how much Luonan desensitized the noise of his soul, the basic unit was right there. As long as the soul configuration, a concept he learned from Jack, fell into reality and truly existed, the circulation of energy and information would never stop. All sorts of information in the surrounding environment would be used at all times. In particular, this was a hospital and inpatient department. Almost all the creatures here carried some sort of illness. One or two didn't matter, but when dozens or hundreds of them gathered together, they formed a gloomy and chaotic spiritual wave that covered every floor. A normal person might only feel a bit depressed, but Luonan could even hear the despairing weeping and howling of the patient. Life was withering and decaying, energy and information colliding, everything was gloomy and deathly still. It only took half an hour for Luonan to feel depressed. He couldn't go on like this. Luonan tried to find a better place for his soul to rest. But the problem was that this kind of place didn't exist on the mental plane, but it was in a deep and secluded area. It was far from the material plane, so it was impossible to maintain the state of being inseparable from the physical body. Wouldn't this be an out-of-body experience? Luonan tossed and turned on the bed. He was clearly sleepy, but the disturbance was endless. He was tormented to the point where he wanted to contact Mr. Bai and ask to be discharged. There isn't a single one that can accommodate soul strength without leaving the body. Luonan suddenly opened his eyes and grabbed the notebook at the head of the bed. With a thought, the dynamo core of an unknown model seeped into his body from his palm, traveling all the way to his brain. He referred to Jack as an example and let the dynamo core stop at the central mass between the left and right thalamus. He poured his soul clairvoyance into it, entering the marvelous crevice of mutual interference between the mental and the material. It's working. It's really peaceful. It's like there's nothing at the end of the deep void. Luonan really fell asleep this time. It was incomparably peaceful. It was already 4:30 in the afternoon when Luonan woke up. It just so happened to be visiting time. His aunt was in the ward, staring blankly at him, lost in thought. Aunt? Luo Shuqing's gaze connected. This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page. Her eyes were slightly moist, but she had already lost control of herself too many times since last night. She didn't want Luonan's mood to be stimulated again, so she took a deep breath and forcefully maintained a calm tone. Do you know how you came in? You slept in the car? Luonan put on an innocent face. In reality, he really didn't know how to alleviate the worry and anxiety of his elders. It was impossible for him to pat his chest in this situation and say, "This kind of thing will never happen in the future." On the contrary, this kind of thing will probably happen more and more often in the future. Luo Nan's hesitation made Luo Shuqing comfort him. "Are you feeling better now?" The doctor said that it's mainly a neurological disorder. The symptoms aren't serious and you don't need to take medicine. Soak in a health pot a few times, stop coughing, drowsiness and other conditions, and you can go home. Normally, Luo Nan should have asked something like, "What's going on in the end?" but he didn't want to say these empty words at this time. He just smiled at Luo Shuqing. "I don't feel anything. It's like I skipped a day of classes. I've already applied for a long-distance video course on your behalf. It starts tomorrow." The conversation between aunt and niece was about to step onto the normal track when a soft electronic sound rang out. A face that Luo Nan was familiar with appeared on the display panel of the mechanical nurse. "Mr. Xie Junping has come to visit." Luo Nan was quite surprised. This person's information is quite fast. Luo Shuqing was a bit surprised. "Your friend?" "Yes." Xie Junping pushed open the door at this time and walked in with large strides. He shouted, "Junior Nan, I heard that you're sick and hospitalized. What's the situation?" He was stunned when he saw Luo Shuqing when he opened his mouth. He had read through Luo Nan's information and quickly realized the relationship between the two. He immediately bowed. "Hello Mrs. Luo. I'm Xie Junping. I'm the same as Luo Nan, I'm also at Acumen College." It must be said that before Luo Shuqing saw through Xie Junping's nature, this fellow's bright and cheerful appearance gave people quite a good impression. Luo Shuqing's first impression of him was quite good. Luo Shuqing was a very traditional woman by nature. Even though she really wanted to speak a few more words with her nephew, she still paid great attention to etiquette since they were guests. She chatted a few words with Xie Junping before excusing herself to understand Luo Nan's condition. She gave the two youngsters space to converse. Xie Junping bowed all the way as he saw Luo Shuqing out the door. He came back and bragged, "Even though a certain someone isn't sleeping and is hospitalized, the procedures related to the Order Club were all done in 3 days." You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.